Hello again, this is Devin from Whiskey, Wine, and Wood. This is our second video in our series of the journey of a barrel lid. So today we're going to walk you through how we actually prep our barrel lids, our first QC checks, and basically just kind of walk through some of the things and some of the issues that we see with these lids. So I'm going to walk around here. You're probably not going to see me much through this video, but I'm just going to kind of walk you through it, and we want to focus on the product itself. So these wonderful lids here. So these are a couple of lids that we actually showed. So this is that Jim Beam, that wonderful Jim Beam lid that we actually went through a little bit yesterday. So as you can see with these lids, as soon as we took this plastic off of it, these guys start to fall apart fairly easily, which is really nice. So a lot of times what we do is, I'm going to take this and set this to the side so you can see. What I typically do is work on about half of it at a time. And so it's really nice when these come loose like that very easily. That came loose very easily. But typically they don't always come apart so quickly. A lot of it is because, again, of that swelling. You have a lot of liquid and things like that that's gotten in here. And these things get bound up pretty quickly on, you see in this tongue and groove pieces here. Another thing that you'll see, and this one has less. Let's see if I can find a section of it. You'd think I'd done a better job here. Let's see. This one right here. So this is one that I glued up yesterday. But you can see here, maybe, kind of. There is a lot of this here. This is actually wax. This is barrel wax that is used to seal the barrels when they put it. So the lid is actually set inside of the barrel itself, and there's wax around it so it holds tight. And a lot of times as that dries, as it heats up, it goes into the cracks and things like that, which is what it's meant to do to help seal everything. But what happens is a lot of times these pieces themselves don't want to come loose. This other side of it actually is a better example. So that, again, that came loose. This piece, that's not just going to come out. And that's why we have these wonderful screwdrivers. So if you do any woodworking, you know the flathead screwdrivers are great as chisels. Pry bars, everything that you kind of need, and occasionally you actually use them as a screwdriver. Not often. So I have various different ones just depending on what we need to do. Typically, it's not too hard to get in here. Just get in here, kind of pry it loose. That one came loose pretty well. If that doesn't work very well, smack a hammer into it to get that in there. And that's usually not too hard to get these guys loose. So what we do, so again, these are these tongue and groove ones. I'm not going to glue these up because it is a messy process. But what we'll do is, again, I'll work on about half of one of these at a time. Put these guys here back to the side. So I'll take these, we'll clean out either with a rag itself, or we have a little brush that I use to clean out some of the gunk and stuff that will form in here. Usually even when I'm taking these apart, we'll usually get some bits of the char wood and things like that in there. But then we put a bead of glue here, inside of there, and then here again in this groove as well. And then press these pieces together. And usually when we start to press these together, you will try to get them back together as best as you can. And press them together, push them together. Sometimes I have to use a hammer to smack these in here and get a good tight fit. And it's very hard to see on the video, but as I put this in here, I can push this side and this side opens. Push this side, that side opens. So again, these are not going to fit together extremely well. This is not like tongue and groove that you see on your flooring or things like that. This is tongue and groove in a barrel that's really, really old. Again, this one is 21-year-old lid. So what we end up doing is gluing these together, trying to minimize the gaps in between. A lot of times you'll see gaps on the end. Those are just cosmetic. The idea is you want to make sure that you've got as much of the barrel lid itself glued together, and definitely in the center. And as we glue it together, you build it piece by piece, getting all of these pieces back together as they kind of came off here. That one goes in pretty well. You'll see sometimes there'll be some overlap. That's when I have to get the trusty hammer out and try to readjust these. Again, it's a messy, messy process. Then these will go on my drying rack behind you. So these guys glue for at least 24 hours. usually longer before I actually start working on them. I'll glue them for 24 hours. I'll make my first rough cuts depending on what the products are, and then they'll get stored away for various reasons. For various projects, not various reasons. Now, for a lot of these, I don't actually clamp these. The reason is when you actually try to clamp a barrel lid, all that work I just did trying to get these pieces to fit back together, yeah, I just undid a lot of it. When you try to clamp something like this on this curve, plus with it, everything not fitting together exactly perfectly, you will end up bowing these out or in because that is what the wood wants to do. It wants to go back to its natural state. So what we do is make sure we've got a really good, strong, tight bond, put it on the rack, so these racks I've got behind them, and lay them flat. So I'll glue them here, put them on the rack, readjust everything, make sure it's good and tight, and then let them set. And I don't touch these until they're done. So that is one for our tongue and groove. This is another one of our types of barrel lids you'll see. That one again came apart very easily. These are barrel lids that are a little bit different. So these are the ones I talked about where they have these wooden dowel pins inside. So each one of these pieces is not tongue and groove. They've got these larger gaps on there, and then you'll have all of these dowel pieces in here. So when we take these apart, these are actually easier to get apart but harder to come back together because of the nature of those dowel pins. You can actually see it maybe a little bit here. You can kind of see the difference in coloration here, where when these are trying to go back together, they don't lie as flat as the tongue and groove. They definitely are bowed in various different places. These are a little bit harder to work with. As you can see kind of here, it's hard to see on these videos, but this piece itself has even got a bow on it. The whole lid itself is bowed. But when we put these back together, we'll put glue, pull out the dowel pins as much as I can. Usually they come out fairly easily, but we'll glue both sides of them back together, get the dowel pins back on, put glue in here, and then these will set again on that shelf until they are ready to go. So actually, I glued up some yesterday. I want to show just a little bit on some of these. So as you can see, so this is a one that we glued up yesterday again. It has a dowel pin, the dowel pins on it. This one came out of the other side, the other one disappeared on me. But you can see kind of here, there's some little more gaps and things here that are a little bit more problematic. Again, these are cosmetic. There really nothing is wrong with it. That doesn't affect them structurally. With all of our products where we have lids and things like that, not only are they glued, but they're also going to be reinforced with black plates underneath. So all of this is just simply cosmetic. And honestly, I actually like the look of a lot of the gaps and things like that because it reminds me that this is a natural product. I'll put one of these guys back. So you saw some gaps there. This is a tongue and groove version where you can see there's a little bit larger of a gap. Again, this side, opposite of it, completely tight. This side, larger gap. A lot of times what I will do with these, I will leave them if they're not too massive, but given the gap size on that one, what I will do is actually fill in this, once we're a little bit further in the process, fill this in with a little bit of wood filler, which again is just cosmetic. And then when it gets sanded down for the final sanding and things like that, it'll match the wood fairly well. Doesn't match perfectly because it's wood filler, it never does. But we try to get it in deep enough so where it's not super visible. Anyway, it just kind of adds to that bits and pieces we have. And where is the other one I was going to show you guys? And here's another good example of some of the issues that we do see. This one, it's not, that is completely impossible to see on a video, but these planks themselves, this is also tongue and groove. These do not fit, well, they fit very well, sorry, but they are not level. There are definitely, this one is probably, this board itself right here in the center is probably, I'd say about a 1/16, maybe up to an 1/8 inch in spots where it's actually sunk down in here. We take care of a lot of that with the sanding and things like that, and this actually doesn't affect any of the structural integrity of the system of these things. I'm going to test this out really well. This is my this is always one of my QC checks. How well did the glue hold? glue held really well. So that's one of my QC checks. If this thing came apart, if there were pops or anything like that that I was concerned about, that's one of my first QC checks on these guys. Again, though, if I see any of these that are heavily bowed, none of these are, so these are all really good, actually good lids. But if I find one that's really heavily bowed, what I will do is to break it apart, try to put it back together. If I can't get it back together, a lot of it gets corrected a little bit later. I can use those mending plates. But at the final QC checks, we would end up stopping if the bow was too much for the actual product. And that's really about it. You might actually see that there's one here that actually is clamped. This one was actually, because it's not a tongue and groove, it is the dowel pin pieces. It had some broken piece of dowel inside that I couldn't get out, and so I had to clamp this one really tightly in just this one spot to get that to work really well. And you might see that this is my wonderful trusty drying rack. I use this to build and to dry all of the items once they're glued up. Also, as I'm doing the other gluing, things like that. These are actually old plantation shutters that I took out of our house. Plantation shutters look great, but they're actually horrible for trying to let in light and to deal with. And if you have anything in front of them, you typically have to just move everything to actually open them up. So I, repurpose them into shelves for our shop, which is something I do with a lot of the items that are actually here in our shop. Again, we really do try to make everything as green as possible in our shop and everything that we do. So that is our end of our second video. Stay tuned, because our next video is when we will take these guys and we will do our initial sanding and things like that. Stay tuned. Thank you.